Okay.
And you'll be able to control the slides now. So at the top, you have that little left and right arrow. You just can click that to advance the slides. And it's all yours.
All righty then. Well, Jennifer, I feel like I'd rather be sitting and having coffee with you than doing this on the phone.
Yeah.
But I would love to share with you some information. Now, you mentioned that you knew Dr. Susskind and you actually saw Dr. Susskind. Did she at any point mention Project Aspire to you?
She has not. It's been about 10 months probably since we've seen her.
Okay. Well, essentially, it all came out of her head. And we're based at the University of Chicago, as she is, and she is our fearless leader. And we have a research staff that has a pretty interesting mix of people. My background is actually television, and Dana brought me on to help with Aspire in the context of video and animation and other platforms that we hope will eventually work for Aspire. And then we've got some terrific research folks. And as we're building Aspire, we're reaching out to parents, we're reaching out to EI therapists and consultants who are well known in the field to review the information that we're creating to make sure that we're on target with the project. So those are the folks that are kind of working on Project Aspire at this point. And essentially what Aspire is, it's a program aimed at helping parents who have young kids with hearing loss improve their child's early language environment. We're in the development phase, and we're creating the curriculum, and as I mentioned, we're just constantly reviewing it with parents, experts, consultants, anybody we can get to stand still long enough where we can say, hey, can we review something with you? In fact, I was at Child's Voice today, which is an oral school way the heck out in Wooddale, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so parents often when they drop their kids off just kind of hang out in various waiting areas, and so we just took a couple of laptops and saddled up next to a parent and said, hey, we're working on this project at the University of Chicago and we'd love your input. So that's kind of what we're doing right now with Aspire. And I don't know how much you know about Dr. Suskind's background, but she is an implant surgeon. She's an ENT, of course, and an implant surgeon. And this basically came about because she noticed that some of the kids that she was implanting weren't getting the most out of their implants. Now that they had access, they just weren't benefiting as much as they could have. And so she started looking at the whys of why that was happening and focused her research on how to enrich their early language environment, basically the critical language period. I'm sure folks have mentioned this to you before, but when our kids are young, from 0 to 3, they're in this critical language period where their brains are making just incredible numbers of connections. It's something like 700 connections a second. It's just crazy when you think about it. And one of the best ways to make brain connections during the critical language period is to talk to your child. It's through words. And so she just really wanted to build something that focused on enriching early language environments for kids. And language environments as far as Dr. Susskind is concerned and all of the staff is concerned is just whatever communication form, whatever form the communication takes, sign, gesture, spoken word. All of that stuff is great. Aspire is focused on parents who have kids who are aided in some fashion, whether it be hearing aids, implants, BAHA, what have you, and they want their child to learn to listen and talk. So that's what Aspire is focused on. But that said, we think that any type of communication is fantastic because it's helping your child make those wonderful connections. In fact, I was reviewing with a mom today, and at one point in the module, I was talking about the critical language period and why it's so important to get those words in, and she mentioned something about how her child, I think, is profound. The level of loss is profound in both ears, and one ear was implanted at 16 months and the other at like 18 or 19 months. And she mentioned that up to that point that they had used sign and that they felt like their child had a huge vocabulary, much larger than a lot of his typical hearing counterparts. It just goes to show you that any type of communication and making those connections is fantastic for your child. And they gave their child a really strong foundation for the learning to listen and talk. But basically what Aspire is it's a program that we're creating for EI therapists. Hearing loss, I've come to learn, is a very it's a relatively low occurring disability. It's like 1 or 2 in 1,000 kids. And so when you look at the EI program, which is a federally mandated program, and you consider the number of kids who would need help from a therapist who has some sort of hearing loss background, there isn't a huge need for it, and so there aren't a lot of folks who have that background. And so what we're hoping Project Aspire will do is help therapists, EI therapists, who don't have the background but who have families within their service areas who need help. So then this will give the therapist the information that he or she needs to help the parents, help the kids. So it kind of trickles down in that way. Actually, I'm yakking and I'm not moving any slides. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. We actually have a school here in Champaign at Carl Hospital. And they have a whole program they call ECHO, and then they have a school, so a 3-year-old preschool to 2nd grade that they do with hearing impaired kids. So we're lucky to have our therapists come through them. Yeah, so our EI therapists come out from there. And
absolutely.
Well,
I went
so
to...
we're kind of lucky down here.
You are. We went to a conference that was kind of a training, 2-day training seminar for DHTs, or is it DHT or DTH? DHT? Anyway, for therapists with, I always flip those letters, I believe, but in Illinois, basically, and we were there on Monday presenting some information about Aspire, and the way that the leader of the conference introduced everybody was to say, this is so-and-so, and this is the service area that she works in. And I mean, it was like there were 2 people covering 5 counties. I mean, the numbers were just kind of stunning. So clearly there is a need for something like this. And so hopefully what we ultimately create will be something that will fill that need. And so I'm going to go back to the critical language period and talking about how all children will really benefit from an enriched early language environment. And this fun, are you actually looking online, Jennifer, or are we just chatting?
Yeah. I'm on the phone.
Okay, so there's...
Online, so.
This is Colleen Brannigan.
Okay,
I'm on the... Wow, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say your name again?
Colleen Brannigan. I added in just a little bit late.
Oh, hey, Pauline. How are you?
Good.
Good. I'm glad you could join us. I think we exchanged an email, did we not?
We did.
Fantastic. So, as I'm making my way through this short little PowerPoint, and then we can just chat when I'm done. But essentially, the graph that I've got up now just shows what I think we already knew, that family environment is so important for young kids. I mean, it's particularly relevant during the critical language period. I mean, parents are just so important for so many reasons, and it's not just because you're around your child all the time and you take him to doctor's appointments and therapy and school and you prepare meals for him, and all of those reasons certainly contribute to why you're so important. But what we believe at Project Aspire as to why you're so important is because you talk to your child. You probably more than anybody in his world talk to him, and it's that interaction that is really going to help him reach his listening and talking potential.
Okay.
So moving on. So kind of at the core of the research, that we're doing as part of Project Aspire is this study that was done, I think it was done in the late 90s, and it's the Hart and Risley study. Have you guys ever heard of it before?
No.
No.
No. Essentially, these folks, it was a study done of typically hearing kids, but it sort of mirrors all populations. So it can easily be applied to the hearing loss population. But what they found was that there are some kids who are hearing up to 30 million fewer words than their counterparts. And it's that huge word gap, that 30 million word gap, that means that the kids on the short end of that gap, when they are ready to start school, have smaller vocabularies, they have more issues with reading, and just generally less success in school. And that study continued to follow these kids. I think through third grade, and never caught up. I mean, they just always stayed a few steps behind. And so with Project Aspire, we're hoping that we can give parents the tools to help their kids sort of combat that potential gap. And because, of course, a child with hearing loss is starting out just a little bit, perhaps a step further behind, because he or she has to learn to listen before he can learn to talk, and that's something that typically hearing children don't have to overcome. Okay. So ASPIRE basically stands for Achieving Superior Parental Involvement for Rehabilitative Excellence. That's kind of a fancy way of saying giving parents the tools to help their children reach their learning and their listening and talking potential. But we had to come up with a catchy acronym, so that's what we came up with. Project Aspire is going to be administered in the EI setting. So it will be in the home, in the natural environment. We're building on the fact that the EI therapists will already have an established relationship with the family, so it wouldn't be like, hi, I'm Beth, and I'm here to do Project Aspire with you. It would be, hey, you know, this terrific curriculum has come to my attention, and I'd really like to share it with you because I think it would be helpful for you and your family. It's a 10-module program, so it's essentially 10 weeks, and each week covers a different topic. Included in Aspire, have you guys ever heard of something called the Lena?
No, I have not.
The Lena is actually this really cool device. It's basically a word pedometer. You know how a pedometer, if you wear a pedometer, it counts how many steps that you take. A Lena we can put on a child, and basically we have these cute little T-shirts that have a little pocket in the front. And the Lena is about the size of an iPhone, and it fits into the pocket, and the Lena basically records what the child hears throughout the course of the day. And so it can hear, it actually counts how many words the child hears, how many conversational turns that he is involved in, and how much television or radio, or basically how much media the child is exposed to over the course of the time that he's wearing the device. So it's this really cool tool that we're using as part of Aspire. So basically we're helping parents by giving them information about enriching their child's early language environment, and then we'll be sharing this Lena tool with them so that they can hopefully see how the tools that we're giving them and they're applying are helping, because the numbers will say, yes, I'm talking more to my child, and yes, my child is making more conversational turns, and yes, we're trying to be better about making sure the television is off or the radio is off, or other things that create enough background noise to be registered on the Lena. So it's this really cool device. And it helps us set goals with the parents. So each week we originally do a baseline recording with them, and then once we start the program each week, we set goals for the following week. We know where they're starting from the baseline recording, and then we'll figure out what they're comfortable trying for the next week. And I've seen Lena used in a different environment, but a similar type of program. Basically, it's a project aimed at improving early language environments for typically developing kids. And what I found is that the Lena is just such it's such an incentive for parents. I mean, there are some folks that kind of make it a game, and the mom and the dad try and beat each other, or there are some parents that just the first thing you walk in the door and the first thing they want to know is, what were my numbers from last week? So it's turned out to be a pretty handy device, and I think it's going to play a great part in Aspire in helping us track people's progress. And essentially, the Aspire will be reviewed by the EI therapist and the parent in the context of the home visit. So we cover all aspects of the early language environment. We'll be doing some video modeling as part of the program, and we will give the parents practical applications for all of the concepts that we cover in the various modules. So that is basically the sort of the Aspire in a nutshell. The 10 modules, the 10 weeks. We start with a day one, which is basically foundational. We introduce what we call the 4 T's, and those are the tools that we introduce in week one, and then every week after that, whatever the topic is that we're discussing, we see through the lens of the 4 T's. And the 4 T's are turn it on, which basically means have the device on and working. Tune in, which means stay in tune with your child and have your child tuned into you. Talk more, which is pretty self-explanatory, and take turns, which is basically the idea of having a conversation with your child. So those are the 4 T's, and they recur in every module. The second module is called Talk Show Host, and basically the idea is if you view your life as a talk show and you're the host, you can fill your child's world with lots of language, and we give parents lots of strategies for talking more to their child. And the reason why that's so early in the lineup of modules is that we feel like if you take nothing more away from Aspire than the fact that if you talk more to your child, his early language environment will be enriched, then that's great. We're happy as a clam. So that's Talk Show Host. And then week 3 is setting the stage for good listening, and essentially in this module we talk about the importance of wearing the device for all waking hours. So it's something we call eyes open, ears on. And we also discuss making sure that the device is working properly. And we teach parents the Ling 6. And then finally we talk about background noise and how it is a huge issue for kids with hearing loss. Module 4 is staying in tune, and again, staying in tune covers a couple of different topics like responsive parenting and joint attention, and basically it's just paying attention to what your child is doing and matching your words and your behavior to do the same thing, but then we also talk about how we know you can't do what your child wants to do all day long. You actually have to get stuff done. And so the other side of that is engaging your child in what you're doing. So that's Module 4. Module 5 is listening development. And we talk about being a sound detective for your child and helping them identify the sound, learn that different things make different sounds and that different sounds have different meanings. In week 6, we'll talk about vocal development and the different stages of babbling. I think when folks who have kids with hearing loss get their child aided, one of the first questions I've heard that they often ask is, when is my child going to start to talk? And so in Module 6, we cover the different stages of vocal development. In 7, we talk about wonderful ways that you can use music to enrich your child's early language environment. In 8, it's routines and directives. 9 is book sharing, basically, rather than we encourage book sharing rather than book reading, and especially because with the younger set, with the really young kids, it's often hard to just get them to sit down and read a book. But if you're actually sort of just sharing the book with them and letting them, taking your cues from them in reading the book, that they'll actually get as much, if not more, out of the experience. And then the last module is It Takes a Village, and this is our discussion of the IEP. And we understand that for parents who will be in the early intervention program, some of them may be new to the program, and their first IEP is a year, possibly 2 years away, maybe even a little bit longer. But from what we've heard from sort of the more seasoned parents who have already sort of jumped into the wonderful world of IEP, is that they wish that they had been exposed, if nothing else, to some of the terminology and just sort of the basic core, what is an IEP and why is it so important, and what's my role in it. So we spend a little bit of time in that module talking about being an advocate for your child and what that means, and then we spin that into one of your most important jobs as your child's advocate is to participate in this IEP. And so that is the curriculum. It's a 10-week curriculum. This is the Lena that I was talking about. It's that little device. It's a language pedometer, and it measures adult word count, so how many adult words your child hears, conversational turns, how many vocalizations your child makes, and TV time. And so it's a great tool for parent feedback. And although we use it in a professional setting, I've been told that it is also available for folks of interest for just sort of family general use. And then the whole reason for this call is I am in the process of recruiting families who may be interested in participating in the video component. Each one of our modules is a keynote presentation, which is similar to PowerPoint, but it's basically the Apple version of PowerPoint. But embedded in the presentation is animation, and we will also have video components. And the way we see this working is that the animation will sort of illustrate general concepts like narrating to your child. And then the video then will follow and give you sort of the real-life application. Well, what does that mean? And how do I do it? And we are looking for folks who want to be a part of Aspire in that way, who want to allow us to come into their home and spend some time with a very small skeleton video crew. We talk about in advance some of the concepts that we'd like to cover with you, and we talk about activities that you think would make sense with your child because you know your child better than anybody. And then we come back at a later date with the crew and just see what we get. I mean, when you're working with kids in general, you just never know, and you cross your fingers and dive in and see what comes back to you. But that's what we're in the process of doing right now. We're looking for families who really want to be a part of the video component. Now, that said, we're also looking for parents who are willing to review the modules. Like I said earlier, we spent today at Child's Voice reviewing with parents and getting feedback, and we're really, the feedback that we're getting is awesome, and we're taking it to heart, and we're applying it to the existing modules and making it better, and then taking it out again and testing it again and tweaking it again, and we'll just continue to do that for the next couple of months, and then sooner or later we'll get to the point where we can't do that anymore. But we're kind of in that actively testing part. So if either of you have any interest in being a part of the video component, I'd love to answer any questions you have about that, or just Aspire in general.
This is Colleen. I'm really interested in what you're saying because I know as a parent having gone through EI, I know that some of our providers didn't have any clue about hearing loss and how to work with that. So I'm excited that you're addressing that component. I'm also excited that you are looking into teaching parents about the IEP earlier, because having gone through both IFSP and IEP and having talked to multiple families who know I've gone through it successfully, I do feel like a lot of education needs to be given to parents before they even get into that realm, and that's a big part of what I feel strongly about, is helping other families get information. So I'm really excited about both of those aspects of this project.
Oh, well, that's great. You know, I struggle with the IEP module because I fear that from what I've read about sort of successful home visiting, going to someone's home and conducting an intervention of sorts, which Project Aspire basically is that you need to be sort of connecting with parents and offering them information with information that is directly relevant to sort of that moment in time. And we understand that we can't do that with Aspire. We're giving them lots of information, and of course their child, it's not like they're going to be able to apply what we teach in week 2 to their child that week, and then in week 3 they can do the practical application. Week 4, I mean, vocal development happens in stages, listening development happens in stages, and you can't rush that. So with the IEP, my concern has always been, we're going to say, oh, and this week is about the IEP, and people are just going to tune it off because they're just tune us out because they have a million other things to think about and to deal with before they get to that point. So it's really nice to hear that you think it's an important component of the program.
I do, and I do agree that some families probably aren't ready to hear it because they may be overwhelmed, but I feel like they always say you have to hear something 3 times before you really learn it, and I feel like if you can, in different ways, get families introduced, I think it is important. Whether or not they're willing is another thing, but I do think it's an important component.
That's great. That's great. And we of course, we've called it down to sort of the bare bones. This is an IEP. This is your role in it. This is what happens. So we wanted to at least familiarize, even if it's the first time they hear it and they don't hear it again until they're actually going through the process. We know that it's in their heads somewhere, and so hopefully they'll think, oh, yeah, I remember that from Aspire or something along those lines.
And I think that ties in with your goals really well, because hearing the words, getting the language, improving literacy, that is all a part of that process. So I like that it seems to be full circle.
Absolutely, and you know, we even take it a step further in that the 4 T's that we reinforce week after week after week as ways to help your child reach his listening and talking potential. We've discovered that you can actually encourage the parents to use the 4 T's when they go to the IEP. When you go to an IEP, you need to take turns talking because everybody at the table has something to say, and you want to make sure that you're giving everybody a chance, and you want to make sure that you're also talking. So it's like a big conversation. You want to talk more, which is another one of our T's, and by talk more, we just mean make sure that you're heard. Parents are equal partners at the table, and so you want to make sure that your point of view is heard. With T1, which is turn it on, we want to make sure that parents understand that they need to be great listeners at the IEP, and if that means that you bring a family member or a friend with you to take notes, so all you have to do is listen, then that's a great way to go. And then with the tune in, it's basically just sort of stay in tune with the folks at the table, use a positive tone of voice, keep your emotions in check. Remember that you're going to be dealing with these folks for as long as your child goes to school here, so you want to get things off on the right foot, sort of thing. So we were able to take that full circle even a little bit further and say, hey, you know what? Remember those 4 T's? You can use them at your child's IEP, and they'll really help you out.
I think that's great. Thank you.
That's fantastic. So, do either of you have any interest in the video component?
Yeah, definitely. We're open to that. We have a little camera hog, so he definitely enjoys having a camera shoved in his face. He likes to perform.
And is this Jennifer speaking now?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Okay, great. Well, you know what, Jennifer? What I'd love to do is I am in the process. I am in the process of scheduling some face-to-face meetings. And I understand that you guys are a trek, but we can make that happen. And essentially, I would come out, we'd meet in person, we'd chat a little bit, we'd talk about concepts, and then ways to illustrate them, and I'd sort of leave that information behind, and then we'd set up a time where we would come back with a camera crew, and it's a very bare bones crew. It would be myself and a sound person and a cameraman, and probably one other person just to help us schlep gear, and just a second set of eyes and hands is always helpful on that end of things. So it's pretty bare bones, and we'd probably hang out for the better part of the day, but of course we wouldn't be shooting the entire day. We get that we're working with young ones, and we would basically take our cues from them, and when it looks like we'd be able to get something, we'd give it a shot, and we'd certainly understand if he or she has other plans, which so often happens when you're working with kids.
Sure. And it's easy for us, like I said, to meet halfway too. My mom still lives in Bradley, so it's an hour for us, but we can always make a day or two out of it. So that's not a very hard
well, maybe for the first meeting we could do that back when, but when we come back for the actual shooting, if it's something that you guys decide you